This is Karina with Discovery Writer, and I want to talk about a character-driven book or a plot-driven book and which is more important. And the easy answer would be that they're both equally important. However, I want to share a couple of examples of the two and explain why I feel the way that I feel. And I'm going to start with a well-known book, and hopefully if you don't know it, then I can explain it good enough. Jane Eyre. It's the story of a girl who is unloved by her family. She's sent to a boarding school to die, and she survives and decides to become a governess and is hired by Mr. Rochester for his ward. And she's very inexperienced in the world and is very wholesome and is very black and white in her decision making because of her inexperience and because of her values. Then you have Mr. Rochester, who is very experienced in the world, and because of his both good and bad decisions, he was but he made good decisions, which ultimately led him to take bad decisions. But he realizes that the world is not so black and white, because even when you make good decisions, bad things can happen to you. And so he's very cynical, whereas Jane Eyre's more hopeful. And they connect with each other on a very intellectual level and a very intimate level with their personalities. They just click. And they fall in love. And when their wedding day comes, she finds out, it's revealed that he is already married to a lunatic. So she and Mr. Rochester do not get married, and she flees the situation because she knows that what he was trying to make her do is just not done. Not that she didn't love him, and she understood why he did what he did after he explained the circumstances. But she's heartbroken, and so she leaves. And then as time goes by, her life kind of resumes. She feels him calling to her in agony. And so she goes to him to find out that the lunatic wife burned down the house. He's lost his eyesight, and the lunatic wife killed herself. And so they end up together. They end up getting married. They end up happy. They have children. His sight returns with time. Very basic story. It's very basic. There's not a lot of plot twists other than the fact that he has a lunatic wife. You know something's wrong, but it's very simple. But the characters are very interesting. They're, I've had some people say, I don't get why they're together. But the fact that they're even saying that, to me, suggests that they at least understand the characters enough to feel like, I don't know if I see it. I felt like I understood the characters enough to see why they were together, to see that their differences is what really made them stronger as a couple. And I turned pages not because the writing was fantastic, not because the story was fantastic, because the characters were moving, and I really liked that. Then I just read, and I hate bringing this up with such a recent author, because I would like to meet this person, and and there's things that I really did like about her book. I read the Divergent series, and I felt that the plot was and the story was interesting. It had a lot of promise, I felt, and honestly, I wouldn't even say a promise, because I think that it pulls you through the story. I remember turning pages and feeling like, what happens next? What happens next? I want to know what happens next. However, I wasn't saying, I wonder what happens to Tris next, or I wonder what happens next. And And when something happened to the character in the story, I didn't care. I remember feeling that characters could be interchanged with other characters because I didn't feel that they were a set character. And that partially could be from the idea of these factions, and that most of the people that the protagonist was around are in the same faction that she is. And so their personalities are going to be fairly similar. I just didn't feel like they were distinctive characters. There were things that I really, really liked about the book, so don't get me wrong. I gave the books, 4-star, and then a 3-star for Allegiant, but I still liked all of them. I read them all. But I remember feeling that no matter how good this story was, I didn't care about what happened to these people. I didn't feel my heartstrings being tugged when things were happening to the protagonist and her love interest. So I would say, yeah, it's important to have a plot. I mean, it's very important to have a good plot and a good story. However, characters are the ones who make the story interesting. We don't read books to hear a good story. We read books to have that good story told through the experience of a character. We would not relate to, in Jaws, we would not relate to Brody if he were dull and uninteresting. Sorry about that. Quentin is a very pirate-like madman, and it's interesting. Even though he can be unlikable in some ways, without him, it would be very boring. We got Matt Hooper, who, you have these characters, and they're so each unique and different, but they offer something to the story. And you can look at that in any movie, any book, that when the characters are diverse, they're interesting, and if you can take away that character's name and still know who says that line, then you've got a great character. And I felt that with Divergent, I didn't have that. I felt that some of them were kind of interchangeable. And so character is more important, my opinion. You might not agree, but you have to make sure that you have strong, solid characters. Otherwise, your readers are gonna, maybe they'll keep turning pages if you have a fantastic story and plot, but they're gonna know that something's missing, the way that I kind of felt with Divergent. But again, I learned great things from the Divergent series, things that I want to implement into my own writing. I felt that was just one weakness in that particular series. Anyway, I hate when my thoughts get jumbled. I don't sound as... Anyway, okay. So yeah, you want to make sure that characters are the forefront of your story. The story is important. What happens to us in our life is important. But when you look back at your family history, if you've got a great story from your family history, that's important. But what's more important is what that person does with that story, how they act. I'm already going a little over, but I want to share a personal experience, family experience. I have a great-grandfather who was captured off of Wake Island. He was a civilian and was a prisoner of war for 4.5 years. Came home to a 5-year-old daughter he had never met. And he went through a lot of awful, terrible things. Saw a lot of terrible, awful things. He starved. He saw men beaten to death. He saw terrible, terrible things. But the fact that he persevered is not, or the things that he went through is not what are important. And it's not that he just persevered and lived through it. It's who he was that made it interesting. He was a very humble person. He was a very spiritual person. And he was a spiritual leader to those around him and helped a lot of these people survive because he would give up some of his rations to people who were sick. And he didn't smoke, and so he would trade cigarettes with people so that he could send things home to his wife and children. It's been a huge inspiration to me in my life and in our family. And that's the thing. It's not what we go through. It's the decisions we make. It's the things we do. So it's the character that drives things, that makes things important. So there you have it. That's where I'm going to leave it. Make sure your characters are strong and interesting and make your readers want to know what happens next to that person, not just what happens next in the story. And all right, I'll get another one out here soon. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks. Bye.